You want to know a secret, Thomas? There are a lot of things that you can fake in this world. Most people don't want to see the predator inside. I would, but the harder I squeeze, the more I remember.
There are a lot of things that you can fake in this world.
And we're finally getting around to the series Westworld. And what they're showing us is the looking out. As I told you, we live inside the eye. The eye is the model of the universe. But they're showing us the material world, the looking out through the cornea. The Wharton's jelly is shared between the umbilical cord and the vitreous humor of the inner eye. Those are the only two places in your body that have this special kind of Wharton's jelly. And what that tells me is that birth into this realm we call our reality is closely linked to the inner eye. Here it is on display. They're showing us the iris. Again, this is the looking out. This is the wide gate. The narrow gate is within. It is the hyaloid canal from the inner lens going back to the optic nerve. But as you see here, this episode's all about the material realm, and I can't wait to get into this series. This is going to be very exciting. And they show them, these androids, actually born into this realm. They're linking the birth and the inner eye together. But these people are going to twist this. Again, they're focusing on the actual outer, the material realm, instead of the inner. And that's, I believe, is where the deception is going to occur. This is the eye. Now in this series, this HBO series, they show all of these androids living in Westworld, which is the world underneath the cornea of the eye. Here as you see it, the land represents the iris of the eye. This is the pupil. There's no mistaking this. And these androids are actually bathed in this fluid, which looks like milk. And this is how they are born into this world. They are born in through the lens of the eye. We're going to get into what Westworld means. Here's the lens through which these androids are born. Now, at a certain point, these androids begin to become self-aware. They begin to wake up to the amnesia. Yes, the amnesia, which is an analogy for the amniotic fluid in the womb that makes us forget. When we are born into this world, we forget everything. And I believe this is where the fallen angels were in prison in the Book of Enoch, and this is what they're trying to represent in the term Westworld. Let me show you where this is. Believable. This is the Book of Enoch. And in it, they talk about, in chapter 66, a place in the West. Yes, a place in the West where there is gold and tin and soft metals. And that these beings, these fallen angels, are buried in the earth in this very location. Chapter 66, let's read a few verses out of this and look at what they were most likely talking about. about the place in the west where these angels were. And they shall confine those angels who disclosed impiety, which were all the things that the fallen angels taught man. And that burning valley, it is, they shall be confined, which at first my great grandfather Enoch showed me in the west, where there are mountains of gold and silver, of iron, of fluid metal, and tin. I beheld that valley in which there was great perturbation and where the waters were troubled. Now, we had covered this book of Enoch in this verse and talked about these hot springs that have this strong smell of sulfur and that they are fueled by the evil of the fallen angels and the earth beneath them. Okay, this is what fuels these hot springs. And as these angels are released, these fallen angels are released, this prophecy says that in these last days that these springs will grow cold. Yes, these hot springs in the west, where all the gold is, will grow cold. This is in the prophecy of Enoch, chapter 66. And it says that these great kings of the Bible will go to these hot springs, and it will soothe their soul, but it will destroy their spirit. And it says here, there will undergo a change, and they will become frozen, these hot springs. So this is something that we are going to be on the lookout for as we begin to examine future prophecies and future events in this world. So I believe that Westworld is the place where these fallen angels are buried under the earth. Now, in the Westworld hell, they are subconsciously running dysfunctional media programs. And this persists throughout the series. They show that these androids get stuck in these pre-written time loops, like programming loops, algorithms, okay? Now, in our present life, in our reality, these algorithms are actually created by pop stars, TV actors, Hollywood. They are the ones that create our behavioral patterns, okay? And we mimic them. They are the Pied Pipers, dictating our pre-programs, our algorithms. And that is what I believe is happening. We run these time loops, these program loops. And at the base of these program loops are drugs, our given personalities that we actually manifest, our identities, our mannerisms, labels that we apply to each other, labels that we label on ourselves, even all the way down to speech patterns. And I believe all this is very real, and I believe they know this, and this is why they create these algorithms for us to run, these programs for us to run. Now, throughout this series, they talk about milk, and they actually show these scenes of milk and human sacrifice. Now, this is another concept that we've talked about extensively on our channel years ago, that milk actually meant human sacrifice. And we explained to you why they put missing children on milk cartons, because it was all about sacrifice. Another subscriber came forward in a video that we did showing that the Twin Towers were the exact dimension of a certain size of milk cartons. And then when the people died in those milk cartons, right about that time when was when they started putting these kids on the milk cartons. Actually, that started back in the 90s, I believe. But we find these odd synchronicities, and also throughout many, many films where they associate death, murder, and sacrifice with milk. It's not just in Westworld, okay? It's in many of these other films. They pour milk out, or milk spills on the floor before someone dies. And if you don't believe me, just go back through horror and thriller movie history, and you will see these patterns persisting. Now, there is the ongoing theme of amnesia. And basically, as each of these androids dies over and over again, they forget. Their brains are wiped. And the theme persists that there is a reincarnative effect going on every time one of these androids is sacrificed in this Disneyland-esque environment. Now here you see basically the center of this actual of the model that they're looking at. This is the scale model of Westworld. This is the inside of underneath the surface of the iris here. They're showing you the iris here, but this is hell. Okay, this is hell. And that's why they depict it in red. And the entire model is backwards. It's inverted. Now, how do I know that, Casey? Well, they tell us in Westworld why this is inverted. Okay, basically, what you have is the iris, which is Siri backwards. Any of those of you with iPhones or Androids who speak into Siri understand that you're speaking into the iris. Okay, this is where they're collecting the information. And through this pupil, which is the black hole, you enter hell. And this is where these people are. Okay, they are in hell. And this is where Westworld is. It is in hell. And it's all backward because the truth is actually inside the eye. And I'm going to show that to you as well. These are two androids here. And they say, hell is empty and all the devils are here. So they repeat this theme that they're in hell over and over again. Now, again, when these androids are recreated, they are born into this milk substance. And this also becomes a substance by which they are sacrificed. So death and rebirth occur through this milky continuum, okay, this milky conduit. This is the scale model of Westworld as their masters, their slave masters are looking down onto this plan of the actual Westworld. And in this portion of the film, the floor falls out from underneath. And you see it clearly that this is the Honeycomb Matrix. Now, where do we see this on the planet? We see this everywhere. We see it at the Giant's Causeway. We see it in Mammoth, in the Devil's Postpile. And we also see it at Devil's Tower, I think in Wyoming. These strange hexagonal matrices. Now, you'll notice that this is inverted. And if you were to flip this upside down and look within, instead of looking out through the cornea and the lens of the eye, and if you look within, we have videos showing you that these become the tree stumps, just like the Devil's Tower in Wyoming, the tree stumps that once reached to heaven. They're depicting basically an inverted tree stump here. Here's your tree stump going inside the eye. And this is looking outside into hell, you see. The robots are forged in the lens, which is underground, which is exactly where the command center is for the Westworld. It's right underneath here. Here's the eye anatomy, and they are showing Westworld here on the iris. Here's your cornea, and here's the lens beneath. Now, this is where things get very, very interesting. We did some videos on the Matrix and what it probably means. There is an epithelial layer just underneath the cornea here. There's also a cross-section of the lens of the eye here. And finally, the cross-section of the actual lining of your interior part of your eye, the rods and cones. And those three structures of the eye, when cross-sectioned, show us the hexagonal matrix. And I want you to let that sink in for a second, because this is deep. It occurs in threes. We've actually identified the lens through which we see the world. Here is the corneal endothelium. I believe these were the scales that fell from Saul's eyes in the Bible so he could see, stripped away of the sin. These are the scales of the serpent. This is what we are mixed with that is causing us to see through the lens of the serpent. This is the hex that was put on us through sin. Now we're going to dig deeper into the show, and I'm going to show you how sin, I believe, represents silicon. And when you take the middle letters out of the word silicon, you will see the word sin. And I'm going to show you how each and every one of us have silicon in our bodies, and that we are Westworld. That is what they're depicting. Now I'm going to show you a cross-section of the actual lens of your eye. Honeycomb Matrix. These are the scales of the serpent. Now, how could God let this happen? He didn't let it happen. The serpent infected us. Here it is right here. This is a cross-section. It exists as a hexagonal matrix. And last but not least, the devil always does everything in threes, as he infected mankind with his bloodline, the enmity between the seeds talked about in the book of Genesis. In the very beginning, God was already talking about this. Last but not least, the rods and the cones. This lines the inner eye. Images, again, we have the honeycomb matrix. This is the matrix, you guys. This is the hex that we're born into. There's only one way out. And this is the white picket fence and the lens of the eye. The white picket fence and the lens of the eye that Katy Perry talked about. Are we crazy living our lives through a lens trapped in our white picket fence? Living life through a lens trapped in our white picket fence. You see, the elite know the truth. They know that we live on the surface of this inner eye. And this is fascinating because she talks about living in a bubble, in case you didn't want to believe me, in her song, Chained to the Rhythm. Now, what is the chain? The chain is their evil chain that keeps you in this physical reality, that keeps you in Westworld, keeps you in hell. This is what they have you chained to through their Pied Piper. Chained to the rhythm, chained to the melody, chained to the algorithms. Are you starting to understand how they keep you locked in hell? This is hell up here, you guys. Westworld, the land of the fallen angels. So take everything that you're seeing here and flip it upside down. Let's do that for you guys. You can get a visual on this. We actually live in here. This is the looking out into the material realm. This is what deceives you. This is what steals your salvation. You know the two thieves on the cross? You know what that really represented? Your two eyes. The two thieves were the two eyes. And the crossing on the cross was actually the cross of the optic nerves coming in through the middle of your brain. There is another umbilical cord. And let's first go into what the analogies are of the eye and the womb. The eye and the womb are one. We have the Hyaluronic Canal, which is basically a tether that connects this lens to the optic nerve. It goes all the way through the center of your eye. When you're in the womb, there's an artery that travels through it. Its sole purpose is to nourish and grow the lens of your eye. As soon as you're born, it disappears, just like the umbilical cord. It has the very same function. The function is to connect and nourish the child. Now, if you look here, you will see that the child's crown, he loses his crown once he's born into this physical reality. When a child comes through the womb and through the cervix, they say the child is crowning. When actually the child loses its crown is when it's born into sin, born into this reality. Now, the cervix is down here, and it acts just like the iris, opening and closing, allowing the inverted child to pass through into this physical reality. Now, here's what's interesting. When the image comes in through your eye, the light enters your eye, it inverts the image, just like the child is upside down in the womb. We also have the retina surrounding the eye. And this retina is just like the placenta, also providing nourishment. We also have the amniotic fluid inside, which is just like the vitreous humor inside the eye here. This entire eye is filled with the vitreous humor, okay? Sexual organs of the female anatomy resemble fruit. We did some videos on this. Actually resemble the 3 fruits mentioned in the Bible: pomegranates, figs, and grapes. And those same pomegranate, fig, and grape structures persist inside the inner walls of the eye, kind of matching up with the female anatomy. This is it. They're called bipolar cells, ganglion, rods, and cones. And they, in fact, look like pomegranates, grapes, and figs. And they actually have very similar functions, believe it or not. So this is the fruit of the inner eye, fruitfulness. Now, the true umbilical is the Hyloid Canal. It is the narrow gate. What do I mean by that? Well, when you're looking out into this reality, when you're looking out this way, this is the wide gate. The narrow gate is within. It is the Hyaloid Canal. That is where you will find the truth in the inner structures of the human body that lead you into all truth about God and his son. So when Katy Perry talks about chained to the rhythm, she's talking about their dark evil gate, their umbilical, which tethers us to hell, okay, through this programming. So in this series, these androids begin to become self-aware. They begin to understand and remember and not see these other episodes in their life as dreams anymore, but as part of their reality. And this is when they decide to basically turn on their captors and try to find a way out. Now, the series doesn't offer any solutions to escape. Basically, both options are bad options, because the androids escaping Westworld would only put them in the real world, which is basically another hell, because they realize how their masters have been treating them, that people come into Westworld and they rape and they pillage and they murder, okay? So how much better is the world outside of Westworld than inside of Westworld, okay? And at the very end, here's a spoiler alert, this woman actually leads the rebellion, and at the end, she has an opportunity to escape Westworld, but instead, she chooses to come back and stay in Westworld. This is Wharton's jelly. It is gelatinous substance that occurs within the umbilical cord and the vitreous humor of the eye. This links the womb with the eye. But more importantly, one of the components of the Wharton's jelly is hyaluronic acid. This substance, hyaluronic acid, occurs naturally in a chicken comb, which is basically the inside of the chicken in the top of a rooster's head, okay? It's called a chicken comb. And inside of this is hyaluronic acid. It is a natural substance with a high molecular weight that seems to mimic the synovial fluid that is inside of your knee and all of your joints for that matter, okay? The high molecular weight is almost identical. It's bioidentical to, and it is one of the chief components of the extracellular matrix. They call it the goo molecule. It is part of the extracellular matrix. It's what holds it together. It is a major component of the skin, where it is involved in tissue repair. It is one of the components of cancer. Cancer cannot exist without this hyaluronic acid, but also it is essential in wound repair. It has been used in the synthesis of biological scaffolds for wound healing applications. And finally, skin healing. They actually found less fibrous scarring in the womb, with the fetuses presenting almost no scarring in the womb because of increased levels of hyaluronic acid. And when they removed the hyaluronic acid from the womb, it resulted in fibrotic scarring. In other words, the child in the womb is protected from scarring because of the increased levels of hyaluronic acid. This hyaluronic acid exists in the skin. It exists in the connective tissues of the body. It exists between muscles, helping to lubricate areas of the body. Are you starting to understand what all this means? Are you understanding that the stitching with this white substance coming out, creating and rendering in 3D, connecting these androids together, is probably representing this hyaluronic acid? I'm starting to think so, and I'm going to take it a step further. It says here, hyaluronic acid also contains silicone. And now we begin to understand what we are mixed with. Who they were depicting in Westworld were you and me. Yes, our bodies contain silicone. Silicone is sin. Silicates are sand. This is why in the Bible we're compared to the sands of the sea and the stars and the sand of the sea, because we are part silicate. It's kind of like glass. Now, this puts it all in perspective. This is a study looking at the cell matrix of silicone. It says here, the matrix from the valve is covered with nodules corresponding in spacing and hexagonal arrangement. This is exactly what we just showed you in the inner eye, the hexagonal arrangement. This is the intercellular structure of our body. We have the matrix within us. It is the hexagon, and you're looking at it right here. Can you see the hexagonal matrix? This is characterization and localization of insoluble organic matrices associated with diatomic cell walls. What you're looking at is the structure of cell walls within our bodies. Where did the silicone come from? This is silicone, and if you take the letters from the center of this, you have sin. And God said the serpent would be ascribed all the sin in the world would fall on his shoulders. Why would God say that? He would say it because it is true that the serpent seed is responsible for all silicone or all sin in the world. We are fodder for the elite, just like it is depicted in the series Westworld, where they go in and do what thou wilt and kill us. This is here they talk about the matrix, a bound form of silicone in glucosaminic glycans and polyuronides. That silicone was found to be a constituent of certain glucosaminoglycans and polyuronides, where it occurs firmly bound to the polysaccharide matrix, firmly bound. They talk about a maze, and it's mentioned throughout the Westworld theme, and it is what everyone's trying to find. You guys, the maze is representative of the outer spiral ring of Saturn. The outer ring of Saturn is not a ring at all. It's a spiral. And the maize is the corn. It's maize, M-A-I-Z-E, not M-A-Z-E. The cornfields. We are the children of the corn. Corn is more complex than human DNA. I bet you no one ever told you that. That the corn gene map has more genes in it than human DNA. Okay? And they tell us this because, or they show us this, and they use corn to represent humans in the occult. There are several Alice in Wonderland themes. We're going to change gears a little bit here throughout. They actually mention the Mad Hatter. The main woman, the character in here, is called Alice. In fact, Alice in Wonderland. As he's talking to his son here, he talks about the Mad Hatter. Okay, and he's reading him the book of Alice in Wonderland. Now, what Alice in Wonderland represents is, if you all remember the story, a young girl who has this wild imagination that goes in through a mirror, the looking glass. She passes through this reflective glass into another realm of opposites where everything is the opposite. Everything is the opposite of what it really is. Are you starting to see the picture? Everything is the opposite of what it really is. So in other words, we don't live here, we live here. Opposites. Now, not only is it a realm of opposites, but what we also have is the black and white duality. Remember the part where she picks up the pawns on the chessboard? The chessboard is the black and white duality. She picks up the pawn on the chessboard and she lifts it up to the mantle. Well, what that really means, the black and white duality is the land of milk and honey. It is the serotonin and melatonin circadian rhythm of your pineal gland. I'll say that again. The black and white duality of this realm is the circadian rhythm. It represents the land of milk and honey. It represents the serotonin and melatonin of your pineal gland. Your pineal gland releases melatonin when the light that passes in through your pupil is cut off. In other words, when you close your eyelids and there's no more light coming in from the sun into your eye, your pineal gland gets a signal and it releases melatonin. And during this part of the cycle of your circadian rhythm, something very strange happens to some people. Yes, to some people. Something very strange happens when you're going through puberty and the light is cut off to your eyes and melatonin is released from your pineal gland. The strange thing that happens is that you get a condition called micropsia. In other words, you feel like a giant, and everything in the room seems very, very small. Alice was in Wonderland, and she was a giant. And everything seemed really, really small. This is a real condition. It's called micropsia. It's actually called AWIS or AIWS. Alice in Wonderland syndrome is the name of this condition. And it is a result that some people get when they go through puberty, and also melatonin is released in the brain when they're in the twilight hours of falling asleep at night, just before you're about to go to sleep. And this happened to me. I'm one of those people. And when I would go to sleep at night, when I was in middle school, everything in the room seemed really small. The light switch seemed like it was twice the distance away. And I would scream out to my mother and I would ask her, something is wrong with my perception of this reality. And she didn't know what it was. But now we figured it out. Now, if you go to the book of Numbers 13, you will see that they talk about the 12 scouts that went out into the land of Canaan. They went to the evil eye. The Israelites were battling the Canaanites. There's your duality, the dark eye and the light eye. The Israelites were the pure seed of God. They were the forefathers of Christ. The Canaanites were the dark seed. They were the enmity between the good and the bad seed. God ordered the Israelites to kill the Canaanites through a system of genocide. Why? To try to eradicate the dark side that was trying to infiltrate the seed of God, so that there wouldn't be no savior to save the world. Now, when those scouts came back, that the Canaanites, in their eyes, we looked like grasshoppers. Yes, grasshoppers. We were small, but the scripture also says that in each other's eyes, we seem small. And that is the part about Numbers 13 that people don't remember. And in their eyes, we appeared like grasshoppers. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. What were they talking about? Have you ever seen a grasshopper up close? Remember, rhythm, the balance between melatonin and serotonin, the waking element in the waking chemical is the serotonin, the sleeping chemical is the melatonin. We're in a balance, the land of milk and honey, which is where the Israelites went. If you look at these images of the grasshopper, all have the same defining feature on their forehead. And that is, here's the pineal mark. This pineal gland is what regulates the land of milk and honey. So when they said they were like grasshoppers, this is what proves who God is. All grasshoppers have this pineal structure, and it is a perception mechanism. It is a perception mechanism. Now, when these Israelites returned from the land of milk and honey, and they were experiencing an Alice in Wonderland episode where they all look like grasshoppers in their eyes, in each other's eyes, they were carrying grapes, pomegranates, and figs that line the inner eye. This is what they returned with. Let's look at pictures. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. They carried the grapes, figs, and pomegranates, bipolar cells, ganglion, and rods and cones. This is what you're looking at here, carried on the pole. What is the pole? The pole is the hyaloid, because the hyaloid is the hyaluronic acid. Remember the substance inside of the umbilical cord? Remember the substance inside of the umbilical cord has hyaluronic acid in it, as does the vitreous humor jelly inside the eye. Hyaluronic acid is hyaloid canal. This is the narrow gate back to the truth, not looking out into the material world. This is your hyaloid canal that I was talking about. Here is where you find the truth. Here is where you escape the white picket fence and the lens that Katy Perry was talking about. This is the narrow gate back to heaven. And guess what? This is the tree stumps. This was the conduit to heaven. These were cut off. That's why they have a silicate honeycomb matrix structure, which is what we see here. Here it is. This is it right here. These are the stumps, but this is all upside down, remember. This is the backside of this. They're showing it to you from this way. This is Westworld out here. The truth is within. This is where we really live here. Okay, we go through the cross to get to the Father. We go through the Son to get to the Father. This is the optic nerve coming out and crossing in the center of your brain. Here's the garden. These are the fruits, the figs and the pomegranate. The garden is all in here. In these structures around the periphery of the inner eye. Ganglion, bipolar cells, and rods and cones is the Garden of Eden, but we're cut off from the garden. This is the tree of life. Here's the tree trunk, and then here are the branches representing the retina. Imagine this is a giant tree, but we can't get there. We're cut off. There's only one way. This is the silver cord, the rainbow bridge. They are trying to find a way through it, the evil ones are, with CERN, but they'll never get there. It is written. They're going to try, but they'll never make it. We are stuck in this realm because of the hex, which I demonstrated in this show today. The hex of the serpent. You guys, the hexagon matrix is the scales of the skin of a snake. That's what it is. That's why it's on the North Pole of Saturn as a giant hexagon. Saturn is Satan. It's the devil. Somehow Satan and Saturn is projecting onto us this reality through sin, the silicone, right? See how it all fits together? We are here, and it is a difficult reality. It's a form of hell. I believe we're in like an upper hell after the fall of man, but there is a way out, and that is looking within the kingdom of heaven. The truth about it is within our own physiology and our own anatomy. That's where the answers are, and they always have been. And what greater way to show us the primer or the inner secrets, ultimate secrets, than for God, the creator of our universe, to implant them into our own anatomy for those of us who really want and try to find these ultimate truths. If you do a word search in the Bible for the word dreams, every single dream mentioned in the Bible was a prophecy of something to come.
Dreams don't mean anything, Dolores. Dreams don't mean anything, Dolores. They're just noise. They're not real.
Now, not only did we identify the code that's on the piano as the DNA code, it goes deeper because the 88 keys of the actual piano represents the two strands of DNA, the double helix. 8 and 8 looks like the double helix. Now, a short recap on the concepts behind Westworld, because this is an important show. And that is that they blur the lines between robots and humans. They personalize robots to make you feel emotions toward these inanimate objects. They do this by making these robots look very real. They're lifelike. And basically they rebel. They become the heroes in the series. They rebel against their human captors because they are trapped in this world called Westworld. It's like a giant western, and basically it's filled with all these inanimate robots that they've given artificial intelligence, and then very wealthy people can go in and kill at will and do bloodletting and bloodlust and rape and pillage and do whatever they want to these robots. So do you see how they juxtapose very emotionally based, deep-seated fears and emotions and powerful imagery to basically get you to feel something for these inanimate robots? Now, this is the highest form of sorcery I think I've ever seen in this reality. How this kind of stuff, it works on so many dimensional levels. It's making people be attracted to robots. This whole sex robot thing, this phenomenon that's happened, this is helping to push that agenda because there's a lot of sexual scenes regarding these robots. So that is planting seeds of that, as well as having emotions toward these inanimate robots. And as these robots become more and more lifelike, you're going to see that this is going to just actually happen. that you're going to be hearing children start to say these things, that they feel sorry for robots. Even though we all know that robots are going to look so real, nobody's going to be able to tell the difference anymore. The sequence that I'm about to show you completed filming before the very first case of the Chinese CV. The elite know exactly what they were about to do. And after we look at this montage, we're going to discuss how plague doors in the 17th century were painted red or black. Now, as you watch this montage, I want you to remember that this finished filming months before the first case of Chinese CV. Now, this isn't the first time we've showed you predictive programming and foreshadowing, but now they're just laughing at us. So this is a show called Westworld, and it's all about the playground for the elite, in which they do what thou wilt to these very humanoid looking androids. Okay, they're in this walled city called Westworld, and artificial intelligence and robotics has advanced to the point where robots look very human. You can't distinguish them, and so scientists use this opportunity to create this place called Westworld, which I believe is traded on like the New York Stock Exchange or something like that. So it's very public, but nobody knows how to really get to Westworld. They ship you in or bus you in or fly you in, and basically the elite commit all these horrible acts of sin upon these androids. Now, these humanoid androids, eventually they become self-aware. Normally, their programs are basically wiped after every event. After every time they die, their programs are wiped, but a couple of the androids maintain and retain their memory, and the memories build up. They start having flashbacks of things that have happened to them in the past, and it's all based on the rule of love, right? Because they're saying acts of love have some kind of power, even for a machine. And this is where they get into transhumanism and trying to get you to accept that machines actually have feelings. So you got to be careful with a show like this, because they want you to feel sorry for the machines, right? So at the end of the day, these androids revolt against their makers, and they kill all of them, they kill all the staff, and they escape Westworld. And they get into the outside world, and they actually infect our world. Infection. So I want you to keep that in mind as you're watching this montage. The theme of infection. Let's watch. This is the title sequence, and there you see the sun with its crown, which in Spanish means exactly what we're going through right now and why we're all sitting in our houses right now. Let's keep going. There's, of course, what appears to be an eclipse, and everybody knows that outside of an eclipse is the crown of the sun. And we know there was an eclipse on the day after Christmas 2019, which seemed to kick all this off, right? The elite like to do things surrounding these eclipses. So this is the opening title sequence of season 3, which finished filming. Here's another sequence here, and they're showing how they're locating. This must be Rehoboam, which actually is mentioned by name. It's the artificial intelligence, and we'll get a little bit more into that in a minute. But Rehoboam identifies these anomalies around the world. Of course, they got the round earth, right? And identifies them by location. One of the locations is China, but I looked and it wasn't anywhere close to the epicenter of what happened. But it's still, nonetheless, the opening one was in China. But what I want you to focus on here is that this is an eclipse. And this part surrounding it is called the crown, or the other word. Let's keep going. Now, on this part, this guy is basically a human obsolete. He's an obsolete human. And in this one and only in first episode of season 3, they only released one episode so far, he is looking for a job, but he can't find a job because he basically doesn't stand out. He's obsolete. And so what he does on the side is there's this app called Rico. And what they can do is they can actually pick up illegal side jobs. Usually they involve some element of danger, some kind of a deal. And he picks up these side jobs to make ends meet as he's trying to find a legitimate, quote unquote, legitimate job, right? And he enters this bar. This is one of his side jobs that he picked up. He enters this bar, and I want you to look on the wall behind him. That is a plague doctor. And to the left of the plague doctor is a heart, both in the mouth, which is where this is transmitted, what we're going through right now, the lungs, the heart, the plague doctor, in the mouth, transmission, you get the drift. Before the first case ever went down in China. Watch. I did a side-by-side of this plague doctor, so you guys could see this. That's him right there. Unmistakable. There are images of this plague doctor all over the internet. You can look it up yourself. For those of you that are even partially awake, you'll recognize the image. They wore these bird-like masks. Okay? And the bird-like masks enabled them to pretend to be protected, but really this was like mockery, right? Remember, all this was the bird flu, right? The bird, and they would wear these bird-like masks. These are also Illuminati masks. They wear them because this is what they do to us. The elite do this to us. Keep watching. It's called depopulation. Let's keep watching. There's the bird. Now, there is no theme of infection other than these few things that I pulled out and showed you in this first episode. They don't talk about anyone being sick, so you can't say this is just because that's the subject matter. It was just a coincidence. No, these are hidden devils in the details imagery. Okay, let's keep watching. Then they admit it right here. Listen.
You said they built the world to be a game, and then they rigged it to make sure they always won.
They built the world to be a game, and then they rigged it to make sure they always won. And that's what's going on right now. They're playing a game, and they have rigged it so that they will win. Basically what happened is too many people woke up. They had to basically shift the power, shift the balance back in their favor. Not enough of us woke up to make a real difference. And what I mean by make a difference is to stop helping to build the infrastructure of our own prison. But it got to the point where so many people were rejecting 5G, and they want to force this on us. And so at that point, they got to reset, right? They got to do some kind of reset. 2020 reset. So let's keep watching.
Rehoboam itself would alert us if anybody even tried. This is Rehoboam.
So this is Rehoboam, okay? And what Rehoboam is in the show is this artificial intelligence that runs the planet in 2058 of all years. 2058, set in the future. 58, you might ask? Well, 58 stories in Trump Tower? 58 rooms in Mar-a-Lago. Remember all the 58 decoding we did 2 years ago? And it's all coming to fruition. This is all going down exactly the way they programmed it to go down. But Rehoboam is something else. Rehoboam was also the first king of Judah, the tribe from which Christ would come. He was the son of Solomon, but he was born to an Ammonite mother named Naamah. Now, when Rehoboam was a child, he was struck with running sores. Why? Because his grandfather David invoked a curse upon one of his enemies, Joab. And he wished sores upon Joab, and so God punished David's offspring, Rehoboam, by having sores on him. A plague. Are you starting to see how all this fits in? It's all been written into their sick little game. Now, much earlier in history, let's go into Wikipedia here. Thanks for everybody that showed up to the show so far. Here's Rehoboam. And of course, this is one of the only images of him. Remember, he was born to an Ammonite mother. And in here they talk about how he was struck with running sores as a result of a punishment that God gave him because his grandfather David tried to basically put a curse on someone else. The fact that Rehoboam, the son of King Solomon, was born of an Ammonite woman also made it difficult to maintain the messianic claims of the house of David. And you got to remember, this was the house of Judah from which Christ. Why would they name the artificial intelligence Rehoboam? There's a reason for it, because it has to do with the plague. Here's Naamah. This was his mother. Rehoboam was the son of an Ammonite woman, and when David praised God because it was permissible to marry Ammonites and Moabites, he held the child upon his knees. Now, before this, the Israelites were not permitted to marry outside, especially not marry like Egyptians and stuff, because it would mix up the bloodlines. But God permitted it in this case. But Rehoboam was stricken with a running sore as a punishment for the curse which David invoked upon Joab. Now, there was another. What do you mean, Casey? There was another woman named Naamah from the Bible with the same name. And she was responsible, most likely, for carrying the serpent seed line through to the other side of the flood. She was a descendant of Cain. This is her here, Naamah from Genesis. Do you think it's an accident that they have the same name? She may have been married to Noah, but some believe she was married to Ham. Now, of course, Noah had another wife, and that's where Shem, Ham, and Japheth came from. His sons, his 3 sons. But here it is, Naamah. This AI was named after this. Now, I told you at the beginning of the show that we're going to cover some other things. Let's start with the Black Death, the plague from the 17th century. And lo and behold, we talked to you about Paint It Black, the song that was played in the Super Bowl commercial. The remake by Missy Elliott and Her. So M-E and Her, me and her, right? And lo and behold, digging a little bit into this research, I found out that in the 17th century, they actually painted doors red or black. Who had the plague? Unbelievable. They were called plague notices. At the time of the plague, it was common to mark the doors of the victims with a large painted cross, either in red or black paint. Do you think the Rolling Stones song didn't have anything to do with this? Well, it's Nested Truths. Had a little bit to do with a little bit of everything, didn't it? That song. Had to do with the Passover and painting the doors red with the blood of the Lamb, the very first Passover that foreshadowed the coming of Christ. But it also had to do with this as well, the plague. And this might have even been a nested truth, this painting the doors red or black, because of the plague, might have even been a nested truth from the previous Exodus story that I just described to you. So this might have been the reason why they did paint the doors red or black. It was a call back to the Exodus. Right? Passing over with the, because remember, it was the firstborn son. And no doubt this disease took a lot of firstborn sons, most likely. Now, what they also painted on these doors during the plague was a scripture, Lord have mercy upon us, or a call out to God, that the angel of death pass over that house. This creates an interesting problem for Missy Elliott and her and Pepsi, who sang all about painting the red door black in the Super Bowl commercial long before any cases ever reached the U.S. shores. Again, this is a reference to plague as well. Now, we called this out because we compared it to the Exodus plague. And I believe we did that before the first case ever reached U.S. shores. So we kind of foreshadowed all this. But I had no idea that the plague also used the same red and black door. So that's even nails it down even more. This is Missy Elliott.
I see a red door and I want to paint it black.
There you go. There's the Pepsi. She busts through the wall. And out on the other side, we see what appears to be, let's show her busting through the wall here. She busts through. And here you see all these, what appear to be virus particles, right?
I see a red door and I want to paint it.
There weren't these white particles before, and now all of a sudden they're all floating around. Make of that what you will, but it's kind of eerie in hindsight, is it not? And remember we decoded The Devil's Advocate with Al Pacino? And we saw all those metaphors that seemed to bring that movie forward into history all the way to now. The closing song in that film was Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones. And remember when Trump said he wanted to paint it black? Those were his words, quote unquote, paint it black. He was referring to the wall they erected at the Mexican border, which is now a reddish color from the rust, and he wanted to paint it black, just like the song. Again, long before the first case was even identified. Now, of course, they're going to give the illusion that he is being opposed. They're going to give the illusion that the left is opposing him and trying to make Trump look stupid because of this whole situation. But that's a game. Like I've been telling you, it's a game. They have to appear opposed because that divides you and I. We never understand what the elite are hoisting upon us. We get lost in the division and never, ever question what they're doing. Now, on to other things. Many of you probably heard we content creators got a notice from YouTube. And I call it a statement of censorship about the CV. You're not allowed to recommend any treatments or say anything about discouraging people away from seeking treatment, which probably includes vague scenes. I told you guys this was coming, and one day our voices would be completely silenced. Now, just in the last 30 minutes or so, some of these concepts began to formulate and materialize and congeal into what I believe are some of the most ultimate truths about our reality and our heritage and where we came from and so on and so forth. And we're going to examine those today in this show. Now, I've got some notes pulled up. We're going to follow this outline regarding the HBO series Westworld. Now, what makes Westworld so important in terms of television series in which they try to use deception or use the truth to tell their deception? Well, we're going to get into that. What is Westworld about? Westworld is about a whole land of androids that are created by man for their own personal desire. This is all funded by corporate America in this series. And they build this world out in the West. It is a Western, but it also has some very dramatic themes running through it.